Grace and peace to all of you. On behalf of Edgar and Carl and Joseph Marty, I welcome all of you to this time of remembering Wendy Marty. Wendy would often refer to something as hemish. It's the Yiddish word for homey, really friendly, sort of the opposite to the architecture of this place, and of course the sudden death that brings us all together here today. So those of us leading our time of remembering have worked for this next hour to be hemish. We hope that the prayers, the poems, the music, and the time around the tables after this for lunch will be a quiet and winsome and friendly antidote. The postlude then will change the tone and send us right back out into the world for us to keep going. But now it's time to begin. Let us pray. I thank you, God, for this most amazing day, for the leaping, greenly spirits of trees, and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I, who have died, am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great heaven, illimitedly earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing human being merely doubt you? Unimaginable. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. Let us now stand together as you're able and sing hymn number 219.
Hello, I'm Linda. I'm a poet and author, and I was honored to serve as Grand Rapids' first poet laureate. Wendy's husband, Eddie, selected 2 poems for me to read this morning, and I'm pleased to share these with you as a remembrance of Wendy's great love and passion for the arts. Many of us here know of her unfailing support of music, dance, theater, film, the visual arts, literature, and poetry. The last time I saw Wendy was several years before her passing at a poetry event at the main library. After the program, she talked to me about one of my books, Lone Country, and how she admired the collection, a sequence of prose poems about traveling. We all know Wendy loved to travel. The first poem I'll read is from that book. It takes place in Spain, and it's titled, "The Cloud Sleeps on the Mountain." Just outside Segovia, its heart embraced by the Rio Eresma and the Rio Zamores, just outside the city, its cavernous cathedral of gilded chapels and vaulted ceilings filled with immense air and light. Just outside its expansive Alcazar, the castle growing from barren granite as if sheer rock dreamed itself a new persona cloaked in the fairy tale of a trapped princess. Do you see it? The mountain beyond the valley, as transported from another dream. The heavy mist covering its silent gray head as if a cloud just escaped the mouth of God to find peace, to fall asleep, to escape that roiling imagination. The next poem is by Mary Oliver from her new and selected poems. The book has a special connection with Fountain Street Church because Wendy discussed it during a session at the Poetry Club. Eddie told me that this poem in the book was one of the most annotated with Wendy's comments throughout the book. This poem is entitled, "When Death Comes." When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut. When death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades. I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Wendy never simply visited this world. She totally embraced it, all of it.
My name is Tim Chester. I'm a member of this church and have been friends with both Wendy and Omar for as long as I can remember here in Grand Rapids. A few days after Wendy passed, Omar engaged in a systematic telephone call roundtable to let everybody know that we're friends, what had happened. And I assured him that by then the entire community already knew. And we talked, we shared some memories. I shared some funny stories. We laughed, and then he said, I would love it if you could share at Wendy's memorial service some of these things that we have discussed. And so that's what I'm here to do today. I knew both of them from my work, which was as director of the Grand Rapids Public Museum. But also my husband, Henry Matthews, was director of the art galleries at Grand Valley State University. And so we saw them constantly and religiously showing up for openings. We saw them at symphony performances. We saw them at the Grand Rapids Ballet. We saw them at the opera. We saw them at poetry readings, history lectures. Wendy even was a docent at the Meyer May House. There was very little that she did not do in the furtherance of this cultural community. Matter of fact, I think her love of the arts and her consumption of the arts and her advancement of the arts was all about one thing. It was about fostering community. And she believed strongly in the power of arts and culture and the humanities to bring people together and create a strong community. She was, as many of you know, a lifelong teacher. She taught English in Detroit. She specialized in reading and reading technologies. She fostered strong lives for children, after-school programming, specialty education, including, amazingly, ice skating, which I have a hard time imagining Wendy doing, but I'm sure she could. She was the founder of a children's repertory theater program here in Grand Rapids. And she not only belonged to organizations, but she led them. She supported arts, culture, and the humanities as a patron. She was a volunteer, and she was a leader. I think specifically of work that she did promoting the Grand Rapids Women's History Council, leading the Women's City Club, and helping to establish its regular program and vital program of monthly meetings. She consumed cultural events avidly. There was very little in this town that you could not count on missing Wendy and Omar showing up, always dressed in high levels of fashion, and there to promote the arts, cheer on the artists, and to take in what the artists were giving into herself, which she then could take and push out into the community. There are two organizations that I'm thinking of that are certainly minor in the big scope of things, but one of them I remember her excitedly telling me about was the Grand Rapids Avid Typewriter Society. She told me that she had encountered this group and she was actively working as a member to promote their work and invited me enthusiastically to head out to the Follisburg Pioneer Village in Lowell, where the group had set up an exhibition of vintage typewriters in the schoolhouse. She was hopeful, I don't know actually if it ever happened, but she could envision an entire typewriter chorus producing musical work entirely on vintage typewriters. And I remember her telling me this story, and I was trying to hold down my inner laughter because I was trying to be respectful, but I couldn't help, and it kind of bubbled forth from my lips. And she looked at me, and she burst into the laughter, and the two of us just howled at the insanity of there being a typewriter society. But I'm proud to tell you, and I'm sure because of Wendy's help and aid, that typewriter society thrives to this very day. It has an active Facebook page, and I encourage you to explore it. Wendy also, she fed people spiritually. She fed them through nourishment. She fed them in this church through friendships and associations. She loved the rituals of this church, and she loved the importance of ritual, and she observed it in her own home. Jewish holidays were important to her, but they always had her own take. Many was the Passover Seders that I was privileged to attend. Of course, she was not content as a Fountain Street Church member with any standard Orthodox Haggadah. No, she found her own liberal version that had neutral gender language, and then she added her own additions to it just to make sure it was just right for everyone who was attending. She also put on a number of memorable Hanukkah suppers. And my husband Henry and I have fond memories, one time being an audience, composing an audience of two, of watching the Marty family produce a homegrown production of the story of Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins, a childhood classic which has now actually become quite well known and has been adapted for both puppet theater and the legitimate theater. Wendy and her family were on the cutting edge when they adapted this for production in their own home. And I leave you with the image of Wendy directing the play, being the narrator of the play, and gently prodding Joseph, Carl, and her husband, who played the role of the rabbi, in following how Herschel saved the old synagogue in the town of Ostropol, now in the Ukraine, of being haunted by these Hanukkah goblins. It's those memories of Wendy, when I think of them, that always bring a smile to my face. Her hats, her bright red clothing, her sartorial sense that she brought to everything. We will miss her deeply, but mostly what I'll miss is the laughter and humor that she brought into my life.
Good morning. I'm Michael Thorne, Wendy's older brother by almost 3 years. My younger brother, Louis, is 11 years younger than me and 8 years younger than Wendy. Lou lives in Florida and could not be here today. I was shocked when Ed called with the news before 8 a.m. on Sunday, November 24th. I never expected to attend Wendy's memorial service. Lou and I see doctors for chronic medical conditions. Wendy was in good health, I thought. She would outlive us both. As Lou put it, good God, inconceivable. We grew up in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, in an upstairs, downstairs duplex. Our paternal grandparents owned the house and lived upstairs. Wendy and I had the usual childhood sibling squabbles. I remember sitting at the kitchen table at breakfast. Wendy and I made a wall of Rice Krispies, Wheaties, and Cheerios boxes so we wouldn't have to look at each other. And both of us wanted to face the back of the boxes where there were games, stories, and puzzles. I would turn them my way, she would flip them back. Eventually, Mom intervened. When I was 14, ready to start high school, we moved to Detroit, after the clothing store where our father worked in downtown Cleveland burned down. The story was that there was a medical supply business upstairs and the tongue depressors caught fire. The move to Michigan was hard on Wendy because she started a kindergarten to grade 7 school in 7th grade, and then went to a kindergarten to 8 school for 8th grade. It was hard to break into the long-standing preteen girl cliques. Wendy explained to me in recent years that I was treated better by our parents because I was the oldest and a boy. She was probably right about that. But when it came to teeth, she came out on top. I had crooked teeth. My parents, never wealthy, asked the orthodontist how much braces would cost. $2,000, he said. They got up and started to walk out. He called them back. I can do something for $50. A retainer to fix his butt. But when Wendy needed braces, they found the money. Daughters, they thought, should have straight, attractive teeth. My childhood memories, such as this one, are generally sketchy. I would sometimes call Wendy to confirm what really happened. I wish I could still check out our family history with her. Wendy's life flourished when she married Ed and moved to Grand Rapids. I know her career as a teacher and academic coach gave her much satisfaction. As adults, with Wendy and Ed living here, and Pat and I, Pat's my spouse who is here, living in Silver Spring, Maryland, near Washington, D.C., we didn't have regularly scheduled calls and contact. For many years, when our mother was alive and our children were young, we would gather near her in Detroit around Thanksgiving. Several years ago, I was visiting in the summer, and Wendy was driving down a quiet neighborhood street. She saw someone she knew walking on the sidewalk, parked the car, and got out for a chat. I've never done that in Silver Spring. She was a sincere supporter of Grand Rapids museums, artists, and music. I hope I can talk to some of her friends after this service about her rich Grand Rapids life. I give thanks for the effort I made to see Wendy and Ed last August. Pat and I planned a quick plane trip to Detroit to visit Pat's sister Carol at their summer home in West Bloomfield. I drove a rental car about 130 miles to Grand Rapids for an overnight stay. Wendy, Ed, and I had a good time. We walked everywhere. Strolling through the Heritage Hill Historic District, we stopped to visit a friend of theirs who was working outside as we walked past. Later, they made me dinner. We walked to a restaurant on Wealthy Street for breakfast before I drove back to West Bloomfield. And that was the last time I saw my sister. But day to day, after November 23rd, I would delude myself and believe Wendy was here in Grand Rapids, vividly alive and living her best life. Standing here now, I know she's gone, and I grieve.
Excuse me, I've been asked to share something from Monica Wing, one of Wendy's cousins. She's here today, but asked that I would read this. What I think most about Wendy is just how much I enjoyed talking to her about, well, whatever. For example, education policy. Do I happen to know anything at all about education policy? No, I do not. I just like talking to her. Wendy was someone who was interested in a lot of things, read and thought about a lot of things, and liked to, I guess you'd say, take her brain out for a walk now and then. And she could argue in a way that was fun and generous. I do remember that when going out to Grand Rapids on vacation, that it really did feel like a vacation, especially back when I was working for the accounting firm. At my accounting firm, allowable subjects of conversation were generally limited to professional football, IRS regulations, and of course, Financial Accounting Standards Board. So how then do I wind up in an extended, friendly argument about Detroit bagels versus New York bagels versus the obviously superior Brookline, Massachusetts bagels? And I'm not even Jewish. It's because it was fun. In the past couple of months, I found myself occasionally still talking to her in my head. And if that is peculiar, I think it's a good kind of peculiar. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everybody who has spoken so far. The next thing in our day together is the Lord's Prayer. Now, Wendy was Jewish, of course, but the Lord's Prayer was very important to her. It came to mean a great deal to her. But instead of us saying it together, we will hear it sung as the beginning of I Go On, whose first word is Amen, from the Lord's Prayer. In the very small town of Steventon, England, stands the world's smallest museum. It's the Jane Austen Museum. And it's housed in one of those iconic and disused, decommissioned red telephone boxes. And it's filled with a few shelves of everything Austen created, her books, and a few maps of some nice walking trails, places of interest nearby, and usually a little flower arrangement based on the photos I've seen. The origin of the word museum is related to the word muse. The muses, of course, were the immortals that were associated with the arts in the ancient world. For example, Calliope presided over poetry. Thalia was the queen of comedy and laughter. And there were many others. They're all lovely on their own, but when they're gathered together and arranged and attended to and opened and shared with the many, then we have a museum with all of its facets, from the sublime to the scientific, the obscure to the obvious, the historically accurate to the silly and hilarious. I think Wendy, who loved Austen and would have likely loved to have traveled to see this phone box, was and will remain not the world's smallest, but certainly for those of us in her orbit, a smallish museum filled with all of us and all the various interesting and beloved things that we have birthed into the world. We have all felt how she did this with us and for us. In fact, I've been told by a good informant that in certain circles, Wendy has become a verb. Oh, we could say, let's just Wendy that. And I think everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about. We might wonder what we might do without Wendy. And we've had a little time now to answer this question, but I know that I, and maybe all of us here today, and many others in her network, but most of all her family, wonder how this is going to look. Perhaps Carl said it best on their Facebook page after Wendy died. Carl wrote, "Living in the after Wendy times feels surreal, as though we took a step sideways through a door that nobody knew was there, into a world where everything looks the same, but nothing makes sense. She's very present for me. I don't mean that I hear her voice exactly. It's more like the silence on the other end of the phone, just before a person speaks." The silence. There's no muse for silence. But I think Wendy knew that without the silence, we are left in a world that slips sideways, where nothing makes sense. So I want to tell a few stories that will perhaps break the silence. Stories about Wendy. In late November of 2012, Wendy and I traveled to Jerusalem and visited friends in the West Bank and Tel Aviv. In 10 days, we'd seen a lot, we'd eaten a lot, we shopped, we visited museums, we walked. November of 2012 was also a time of conflict. And we'd seen this play out in many ways. So there was a sense of sadness that kind of was over the whole trip we were there. It was surreal to sit in a bar having a drink at the King David Hotel while 90 miles away there was a war waging. This made no sense. On our last day, it was Thanksgiving Day back here in the U.S., so we decided to search for a dinner that might have a little taste of home. So we wandered from our hotel down to the old city, and we stopped and looked at menus and windows, and we finally found a place that had pumpkin soup. So we stopped in and talked, of course, and as we finished the meal, I said to Wendy, "Tell me, what is your favorite moment from our time here?" And there was silence. Then Wendy said, "Finding the best moment? I don't know if I can." And then she started talking about theater, and I thought, what is going on here? She said, "My favorite play is Our Town. I'm going to cry as I tell you this story," she said. At the end of the play, Emily, the main character, has died during the birth of her second child, and she's sitting there with all the other people who have died in various corners. They're sitting in rows on folding chairs, and she's afraid to join them. Emily wants to go back to relive her history. Just one more day, one more moment on Earth. The townsfolk sitting in the chair all warn her against and say, no, that's not a good idea, don't go. But she continues to plead, and finally they say, okay, pick a day, one day. So Emily picks the day that she met her husband George. She thought that would be the best one, and they say, no, don't do that, it'll be way too painful. Pick an ordinary day. So Emily picks her 12th birthday. She returns and she sees her mother making breakfast, and she gets her usual quick morning hug as her mother reminds her about something. Wendy paused, and her voice filled with emotion, and she said, "Emily is hoping to return to the love that she's lost in death. And what she finds instead is incredible pain at the way we live without seeing the beauty. She begs her mother, 'Oh, Mama, just look at me for one moment as if you really see me.' Unable to bear it any longer, Emily asks to leave, and she bids farewell to the world, saying, 'We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize. Sleeping, waking, newly ironed dresses. Oh, Earth, you are too wonderful for anyone to realize you.'" Wendy's eyes filled with tears, and she said, "Even in this broken land, every moment, every day is filled with this incredible love. If only we can see it, it is there for us. So I could never choose the best day. They were all perfect." A while ago, on her thoughtfully curated Facebook page, filled with mostly announcements about all the stuff that we were doing to help us promote what was happening, Wendy shared a photo entitled "One Flew Over Green Valleys." And I think it's no coincidence that the photographer's label, the person who took the picture, was Joseph on the Road. The picture is a very high drone shot of this huge, beautiful, lush green valley and these amazing high mountains. And it's only revealed in part by rays of sunlight, golden sunlight, that are piercing through what must be huge looming clouds overhead. Another photo are the words of another photographer, one of our wonderful photographers here, Sally Mann. And Sally wrote, "As for me, I see both the beauty and the dark side of things, the loveliness of cornfields and full sails, but ruin as well. And I see them at the same time, at once the ecstatic beauty of things and yet chary of that ecstasy." The Japanese have a phrase for this perception, "mono no awarewe," and it means beauty tinged with sadness. For me, living is the same thing as dying, and loving is the same thing as losing, and this does not make me a madwoman. I believe it can make me better at living, and better at loving, and just possibly better at seeing. Better at seeing. Wendy saw us. You can see that look on the cover of this bulletin today. Our own photographer, Diane Carroll Burdick, captured this seeing. Wendy, with her smile, her gaze, her musing, signals a delight not only at the sight of her friend, but in the whole of the moment. Ah, there you are. I see you. It's a good day. It's a very good day. And good days don't just happen. Wendy showed us all that they are made. When we all come together and when we gather our sad, messy, brilliant, complicated, amazing selves, we create something that is too beautiful for words. Wendy encouraged things to happen. This was how she helped us make sense of things. And in her honor and in her memory, we can do this too. Because collected in her gaze, Wendy made us better at living, better at loving, and just possibly better at seeing. Now, isn't that just perfect? Doesn't that feel wonderful? Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. From Wendy's hobby lobby. Just as the hand held before the eye can hide the tallest mountain, so the routine of everyday life can keep us from seeing the vast radiance and secret wonders that fill the world. Let us all now rise and sing 318, We Would Be One. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed, I have to cast my lot with those who age after age perversely, and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Please be seated.